This is Monster Chick, and you're watching History and Headlines with ActionGal.
History and Headlines with ActionGal. This is Pet Monster. Thanks for joining us on History and Headlines with ActionGal.
Okay, thank you, ActionGal and the History and Headlines team. I am your ever-faithful Granny Monster, and this portion is talking about mass hysteria. Now, some of you might not know what mass hysteria is, and mass hysteria is when a group of individuals is caught up in the same troublesome idea. And then history is made because of the way we've misinterpreted some stuff. Okay? And we want to thank Mother Nature Network for this particular article, which of course you're more than welcome to read it in its entirety. Okay? Now, one of the things that was very prevalent as far as mass hysteria in our history was something we like to call the Salem witch trials. Okay? And this is one of the best-known incidents of mass hysteria. It began when two young girls in a small town in Salem Village began to experience seizures that were not explained. And they just went on to confess a bunch of stuff and blame a bunch of people, and it was quite a bit of a good example of mass hysteria. Okay? And actually more than 20 people were executed and 100 were jailed before this common sense was restored to people. So, number 2 in this article is something called the Miracle of the Sun. Okay? And in May of 1917, Fatima, Portugal, 3 children claimed to have received an apparition of the Virgin Mary. There would be several subsequent supernatural visitations before a complex and wholly debated incident that took place on October 13th, 1917. And really, not a lot of harm was caused by it, but at the same time, it did bring forth a lot of mass hysteria. Now, the Halifax slasher of 1938, there's your troublesome brute. Yes, people and victims were reporting to police that they were, in fact, just almost myrtleized by the Halifax slasher. Many came forth and proclaimed that they were also victims of the Halifax slasher, only to find out later that the first guy actually said that the wounds were self-inflicted and that there in fact was no Halifax slasher. Okay? So that's actually a point in history when Munchausen syndrome on a grand scale took effect. Now here's one that I can kind of get behind a little bit. It's the Tanzania laughter epidemic. Where was I doing stand-up when this went down? In late January of 1962, at an all-girls school, Tanzania, 3 girls began to laugh uncontrollably. They didn't stop. Even when disciplined by their teachers, bizarrely the laughter spread through more than 90 students for no apparent reason. Well, it was 1962, so I'll let you go with that one. But yeah, so it was just this crazy time in history when people just had uncontrollable laughter, and it grew into a mass group of hysteria. Sri Lanka, 2012. A more recent example of mass hysteria also involves schools. In mid-November of 2012, strange flu-like symptoms struck a school in the country of Sri Lanka. In addition to intestinal problems and fits of coughing, some children had a handful and a handful of teachers experienced rashes and headaches. And it goes on just to, this was example of a mass hysterical situation. So there is something to be said about group mentality, is there not? It can do a lot of healing, it can do a lot of harm. So best to think for yourself, eh, kids? I am your ever faithful Granny Monster. Thank you. Over at History and Headlines with ActionGal.
Recently, I came across an item about the dancing plague of 1518 that happened in Strasbourg, now France, in the Holy Roman Empire. Its duration was about a month, involving some 400 people, some of whom died. This event started in July of 1518 when Mrs. Trepea danced excitedly in a street of Strasbourg. Mrs. Trepea continued to dance for 4 to 6 days, and within a week there were 34 others. Within a month there were around 400, mainly female dancers. It was rumored that the plague was responsible for about 15 people a day dying, but the records of Strasbourg did not mention the number of deaths or even if there were any casualties. Unknown why these people danced, as the plague advanced, worried nobles petitioned the advice of local doctors, who ruled out supernatural causes. The doctors stated that the dancing plague was a natural illness caused by, quote, hot blood, unquote. So how did the authorities respond to this newly acquired knowledge? They encouraged more dancing. 2 guild halls and a grain market were open, a wood stage built, and these wise zealots, powers that be, believed the dancers would get well by dancing uninterrupted day and night. Musicians were hired to keep the dancers moving. How considerate! The result, of course, was a significant increase in the disease. What caused this dancing plague? One theory is food poisoning caused by psychoactive chemicals on a fungi which grows on grains of the wheat family, such as rye, used for baking breads. This chemical is structurally linked to the drug LSD-25 and is the substance from which LSD-25 was initially synthesized. But historian John Waller argued this theory does not seem viable because those poisoned by this fungi likely would not have danced for days upon end, and it was doubtful that so many would have reacted in the same way to its psychotropic chemicals. Most likely the dancing plague was an outbreak of mass hysteria or mass psychogenic illness. The afflicted were primarily adolescent females. The high elevations of psychological stress might well have been the guilty culprit. If this be so, might not dancing, then, be a psychological escape mechanism we employ today?
H&H with ActionGal. This is Pet Monster, and thanks for watching.